Listen up, I'm about to get dope. It ain't nothing but some shit I wrote.
What's going on? It's time for another episode of Too Hard for the Radio. Transmitting from the future-proof state of Greater Idaho, I am the one-armed madman. And from the Badlands of southern Montana, it's Nolan 5150.
18 making raps till I'm 80 though. And too hard for the fucking radio. I'm too hard.
All right, let's hit it. Big show planned tonight. How we doing, my man?
Oh man, I'm still kicking.
World War III is looming. The Don got raided the other day, but the big question is, what did you think of the new Predator movie?
It was interesting. I have a hard time, obviously, I'm all for women's power. I love them, but
the obvious 90-pound girl fighting a predator.
I'm sure there was an occasional thought of the primal indigenous tribes and stuff where you were hunter-gatherer and you had to actually hunt for your meat. I'm sure there was an occasional thought by the chicks, I wonder what it's like to go hunt, but I have a hard time believing that very many of those situations actually came to be.
It's amazing it's amazing that every fucking movie about Native Americans is like the most progressive tribe ever.
Yeah.
The thing that really got
I don't
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I don't, not acting like I in any way, shape or form know what it's like to live in a tribe, but I don't know.
That's enough out of you on that one. The thing that really got me, I don't watch movie previews because I don't want to see any part of it before I watch. I know a new Predator movie is going to come out. I'm going to watch the movie. I don't need to see clips of the movie beforehand. So the only thing I knew about it was there's a new Predator movie and it takes place in a native tribe. So my original thought was all right, if you're going to make a progressive movie, this is how you do it. You incorporate it with something like this and you make it good. So my original thought was they should do this like Mel Gibson's Apocalypto meets Predator.
Yeah, that would have been way better.
But right away, the natives are speaking fucking English.
Well, they got to do that for the audience.
No, they don't. Apocalypto did fine. Apocalypto did great.
That was epically more intense, I think.
Yeah, but they could have done that.
100% agree. Yeah, they should have.
They could have.
Probably
and then they had the white people speaking French. It was fucking crazy. Can you imagine?
Well, maybe they were French guys.
Can you imagine the board meetings about this movie? It's like, hey, we're going to do this. Oh, well, we can't make them speak Cherokee because then we're going to lose all these people. So, but the white people have to be in it because we have to have the white people destroying everything. In the beginning, I thought maybe the Predator's going to be like an analogy for the white man destroying everything and killing everything. But no, they brought him in. And I was like, my God, they didn't even do like in Vikings when they would meet up with English people. They would, the scene would like flop from them the Vikings speaking English to them speaking Norse and to the English people. And it worked. Like, it's not great, but you can't do an entire season, series of Vikings in Norse. Nobody's going to watch that shit.
Yeah.
But you could at least make it.
But
I would have preferred, and I'm not a Native American, but to me, it's like, if you're going to make a movie about Native Americans, do it. don't do this whitewash version where they speak English. Like, show my fucking culture. Don't fucking whitewash it.
I totally agree with that. Yeah. I would still go see it. I know you would still go see it. The problem is there's a huge percentage of people that would not watch it, even if it was free on Netflix.
Well, it was free on Hulu, essentially.
Still gotta pay for Netflix, but
I mean, it was on Hulu. It's no different. Like, it wasn't in theaters.
But,
and these movies aren't making any money. They just canceled Batgirl. It had a huge fucking budget. And they were just like, yeah, these streamers aren't making money. The cheap money's gone. Interest rates are going up. The cheap money's gone. These streamers aren't going to be able to dump a ton of money and, continue.
Well, I feel like they could in the right projects. One thing that was kind of interesting to me, because Netflix has been taking a huge hit lately, but they just put out, I don't know if that the Stranger Things is all done, but
I don't know
that
either.
was a giant like Goliath series.
Yeah,
I watched it, I enjoyed it, but it was like a cult classic, like a right out of the gate cult classic. But
they did that
like,
weird thing where they split the final season up into 2.
That's one thing that's the reason I'm not sure. Like, they did 8 episodes and then they waited a month and then put out one more episode.
Yeah.
And I think that's it, but I'm not sure.
I think the reason is that they want to get people they've got short timers coming in. They've got people like me who's had a Netflix account, and I should get rid of it, but I watch TV. But they've got people like me who have had a Netflix account for years and it's just going to continue to have it. And then they have short timers who are coming in to watch that show. So my thought is by splitting it up and keeping it and putting it out like 2 months later or 3 months later, they're hoping that they'll keep the short time subscriptions on for a few more months. I think that's why a lot of these subscription services are doing weekly releases of shows, because they go, if we do it all at once, people are going to buy a month worth or get a free month worth of our platform. They're going to watch the entire show in a couple of days, and then they're going to delete their membership again. If we put out 10 shows over 10 weeks, we can get 2 months worth of memberships.
Yeah, that's a good point. But, shit, what was I going to say? On the membership, fuck, I can't remember.
The thing I was thinking when I'm watching Predator is like, how are they going to go more progressive than this? And then instantly I went, oh my God, female Predator. We got to get Predaher. We can't have this patriarchy taking control of the Predatorverse. We got to have a woman Predator going in there. How can we have the woman native fighting a man Predator? I mean, this isn't obvious. We got to have Predaher.
With a bunch of cuck predators just sitting there watching Predaher slaughter.
No, we got to have Predaher starring Gina Carano on the Daily Wire streaming service.
I like that. I think you're onto something.
Yeah.
But
So
I remember the thing I was going to say about the Netflix series. So I've seen a trend where they do that bullshit split the last season of the series.
they did it with
like
Ozark too.
Yes, and just like Peaky Blinders, they do that last little stint. That's totally a bullshit. Well, mostly a bullshit season, only to set up a film, and then they try to just turn it into a film franchise after that.
Yeah, Predaher, the Predator 47, Predaher. It's got to happen. We can't have this. We got to have
bring Arnold back.
Bring Arnold back, and he's got to get his ass kicked by a female Predator. That's the only way we can rectify this situation. So I went ahead and fired up my trusty flux capacitor and plugged into the internet to see if this ever happens in the future. And I found an article here. It's from 2050. It's by Us Whenever. And I thought that was weird. So I looked into Us Whenever, and it looks like they were, had an employee takeover. So they got rid of their weekly. It's no more Us Weekly. It's just Us Whenever we feel like it.
Are you serious?
Oh yeah, that's what happens in 2050.
Oh.
So here's the 2050 article. We all remember the 2035 arrest of director, acting person Gina Carano. It was fresh off the hit and now defunct Daily Wire Predator reboot, Predator versus the Mandalorian. Although it was a smash hit and captivated their streaming service past Apple and Netflix, some pointed that Carano had clearly and deliberately misgendered the Predator in their film. Sir, that's a gender non-binary term. We thought the franchise was officially dead, but it was announced today that we're finally going to see another Predator film. Predator. So that's how you tap it. You got to have a non-binary Predator. Is that a tit? Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a bulge down there? Who knows? Is that an Adam's apple hiding behind that mask of yours? Maybe. You remember that picture that those pictures I sent you of Brittany Griner the other day?
Yeah.
I saw a picture of her pop up in my thing and I go, that's an Adam's apple. And apparently Russia is now they say that they're going to test her DNA to see if she's a man or a woman so they can find out where to house her properly.
Damn.
Could you imagine if we find out that this chick is not a chick, but a dude has been playing in the WNBA for years?
That wouldn't surprise me at all, honestly.
No. And then
but it
and what would and the response would just be like, yeah, fuck you.
For real.
She's a woman. Fuck off.
That's like that.
Our ratings are about to go up.
Transgender swimmer.
Yeah. I guess like, Trump brought the chick that got second place to her out on the stage with him in a rally the other day.
Oh yeah, nice. Yeah, that's like the swimmer transgender person. It
with the huge bulge and the massive Adam's apple.
So you're barely above par, subpar by collegian standards, but then so to make yourself feel better, you have to go be a woman to crush every woman's record. It just it doesn't make sense.
My stance on this.
Man competing against women.
My stance on this. Let it happen. Bring it up. Keep them coming. Make these universities the laughing stock that they should be. Go start your own swimming match. Have these girls compete in a Tough Mudder or something like that. Make your own swimming contest that the Olympics can't ignore and just bypass these universities altogether. Don't waste your fucking money. Get a real job and compete and go to the Olympics that way. This whole school thing has got to go. And if they're going to make themselves look like idiots, I say let them.
Yeah. That's a very good point. You just let them
eat themselves from the
crumble.
inside.
Yeah.
So the great Jesse Ventura had a tweet after the film. I saw that film and I saw her use my line and I said, I need to make a tweet. Pray, great film. Amber Mid-Thunder, you definitely ain't got time to bleed. Welcome to the Predator family. Thank you for making such a thoughtful, creative, and wonderful film.
Pretty good.
Yeah, The great Jesse Ventura. He kind of fell apart during COVID, but he's still the man. Did you see his, I have a mask. People aren't wearing masks. Could you imagine in World War II? My mother served in World War II. But I've got this in my notes. Batgirl was $90 million. They canceled it. They just said, yeah, no, done. And they're not going to show the film.
What film?
Batgirl. They made a Batgirl film about like a lesbian, non-binary Batgirl. and they're just not going to put it out.
For real?
Yeah, they either didn't finish it or something happened with the streaming service, and they just said, you know what? Fuck it. We're done.
No.
$90 million movie. They're not, I don't think these movies are making return on investment. I mean, with this streaming service shit, who knows how many people are actually watching them. You know what was really crazy? I looked in Rotten Tomatoes, and the new Predator film got a 93, and the original got an 80. My thought is that all the people reviewing it were terrified to give it a poor review, even 4 stars, because they would get called out for being racist or some bullshit like that.
Yeah.
It's like it's like the audiences in some of these late night TV shows when they're like, you know, in Saturday Night Live, it's like the audience have got fucking guns pointed at them, and they're like, do we laugh at this, or are we allowed to laugh at? Can you please use the sign? We need to know what we're supposed to laugh at.
Okay. No.
All right. Well, from one Predator to the next. Nancy Pelosi shoving her big fake tits where they don't belong. I don't know if there's a predator in the universe as scary as that broad. So she was over in Taiwan this last week, shoving her big fake tits where they don't belong. And that's kind of the story of America for the past, 80 years, shoving our big fake tits where they don't belong.
Man. Yeah, that's such a deep state move. I don't even know what to actually make of it. The one thing that was really scary, I saw a rep for the White House completely lawyer it up. He was like, well, we don't control where she goes. If she goes, then she goes, and we don't know if she's going to go, but we'll make sure she'll get there safe. And it has nothing to do with President Biden, and it doesn't change our agreements and blah, 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 blah. Just totally neutralizing it in any way, shape, or form. Yeah.
There's been a lot of ambiguity over this
either
shit.
Stand up and back it up. Yeah.
It's been nasty. So let's dig into this island off the coast of this Chinese island off the coast of China. I don't even know I've never even heard of Taiwan. I don't even know what it is. All right, let's find out some history about this place. We're gonna do a few clips from the Scott Horton Show. This is from Peter Van Buren on November 19th in 2021. Let's find out some history about this island.
But basically, after a civil war interrupted by World War II, when the communists and the nationalists joined forces against the Japanese, when World War II ended, then the communists and the nationalists went back at each other, and the communists won, and in 1949, the nationalists decamped to the little island of Taiwan, which otherwise was historically insignificant in Chinese history, and arguably wasn't really part of China for a large part of Chinese history. The nationalists were quickly adopted by the United States in the anti-communist thing, and the United States recognized Taiwan as the legitimate government of China until 1979, when the United States changed its relationship and recognized Beijing, and basically put Taiwan into this amorphous diplomatic category where we don't officially recognize them as a country. That was all created through a series of communiques known as the Taiwan Relations Act and the equivalent in the Chinese mainland. And that's the sort of framework that governs all that. Now, for 70 years, since all that happened, since 1949, China has not invaded Taiwan. And that is a significant thing because it requires you to come up with a change event. A change event is everybody who writes bad fiction knows. A change event is when mild-mannered anti-war Scott Horton becomes a vigilante superhero because one of his children is kidnapped by a cartel, and you go on a killing spree. That's the change event. And so when you're going to say 70 years of motion in one direction is suddenly going to go in a different direction, you need a change event. And it has to be significant enough to actually motivate the change.
Well, unfortunately for these fucking psychopaths, Nancy Pelosi's big fake tits weren't a big enough change event to really provoke anything.
Well, I don't know how you take your tits, but I prefer mine not full of air. I don't think they're very provocative at all.
But this is what they're going for. They have to poke the bear. This hasn't happened yet. We need something to happen. We need to make more weapons. We need to spend more money.
That was another thing that I forgot to mention before. Whatever White House rep I heard talking about the Pelosi Taiwan trip, they reiterated several times that the United States does not recognize Taiwan as a sovereign country or something like that. Yeah. That blew my mind. And that's what it just said in that video. That's just outright bowing down to China's will.
Well, this is how it is. I mean, they are, and we're going to get into this further, but the air's 6,000 miles away. The Pacific Ocean is not a lake of North America. These people, we're going to get into it a little bit more, but initially, we all know what this visit was about, semiconductors. So let's read a little bit about semiconductors. The House Speaker's trip came after Congress passed a bill that included $52 billion to subsidize domestic chip manufacturing. While in Taiwan, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi met with the island's top semiconductor industry leaders as the U.S. is looking to gain an edge on China when it comes to chip manufacturing. Pelosi's trip came after Congress passed the CHIPS and Science Act, a massive $280 billion piece of legislation on top of the $370 they just passed. That includes $52 billion in subsidies for companies to build and expand chip manufacturing facilities. Pelosi met with the chairman of Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, the world TSMC, the world's biggest chip manufacturer, to discuss the CHIPS and Science Act. The meeting signals that the U.S. is looking to entice TSMC to open more facilities in the U.S., which the subsidies included in the legislation. TSMC is currently building a $12 billion semiconductor facility in Arizona, which is expected to be operational by 2024. Pelosi said at a news conference in Taiwan on Wednesday that the CHIPS and Science Act means more cooperation between the U.S. and Taiwan. Quote, "We just passed the CHIPS and Science Act. This is something that opens the door for us to have better economic exchanges." Oh, I wonder whose economic exchanges are going to do better from that. Pelosi's husband, Paul Pelosi, has been under scrutiny for his trading of semiconductor stocks amid allegations of insider trading. In June, he purchased stocks in NVIDIA, an American chip company. He then sold 25,000 shares of NVIDIA stock at a loss. Look, I just lost some money. Look, there's nothing to see here. The day before the House passed the CHIPS and Science Act, I wonder how he knew that was going to happen. Overall, global semiconductor stocks took a hit due to Pelosi's trip and unnecessary and uncertainty that it caused. Those big fake tits are just stirring up all kinds of trouble. So the big thing with semiconductors is, they make all the semiconductors. It would take us 10 years and $1 billion to start building them over here. Well, that's a problem that they created. So let's go back into Scott Horton. This is with Daniel Davis on November 12th, 2021.
And it would take a long time. I don't know that it would take a decade, but it would certainly take a number of years. And the problem is, this is what gives China a lot of leverage should they make this move, because if they're smart, and they usually are, they will put a big, huge no-fire zone like about a mile around that factory so that not a bullet touches it, because they want to control Taiwan and the ability to have to make those semiconductors so that they have extraordinary leverage over the rest of the world that will mitigate anyone's ability to punish them economically after, because they can still sell the semiconductors. They'll have control of it. That's the ultimate threat that I see, is that would give them leverage over everybody.
Yeah. Well, like you say, they could.
So, big leverage. If they control all the parts in the phone, They kind of control the entire economy at this point. We run a digital society, especially the more you lock it down, the Zoom class doesn't get affected, but this is a way to put a chokehold on the Zoom class.
Yeah. And that's the new wave. It's not like, it's not like everybody's wanting to do more face to face. Everybody's wanting to do more screen to screen.
And the problem here is that we are projecting this tone that we need to go to war over things like semiconductors and intellectual property. And intellectual property, that's a whole nother rabbit hole of bullshit. But essentially, you cannot own an idea. You have to put that idea into a product and sell that product. This is a way for tech companies to say, you can't copy my website, or pharmaceutical companies to say, you can't make a similar drug to mine. This whole intellectual property idea, you're defending the worst people, the people that hate you. There's no reason that we need to go to war over intellectual property to save intellectual property for the people who want to enslave you. It's just ludicrous. And this whole tone of we can't let them take control of the semiconductors. These are our semiconductors. Again, thousands of miles away. This is not an island in a lake in North America. This is right off the coast of China. We have recognized that this is there. I mean, we'll get accused of a lot of things on this, but this should be common sense. This is not something that we need to poke the bear over.
Yeah, if anything, just let it go.
Well, we don't let things go. We have to be firm with them on things, but on things like intellectual property and Taiwan, there's just concessions are going to have to be made. We cannot do this.
I'm talking semiconductors and microchips. They have the bulk of the manufacturing. Yeah, stateside economy will take a hit if we say no mas and bring everything in house and start building microchips and everything in the States.
And the government could speed up this process, building permits and environmental permits to build these plants. I bet you could cut down the time. I mean, China's building these plants all over their country. Like, I think 80% of the new chip plants that are being created are created in China. They're doing this fast. So it's not like this is something that we can't do. It's something that we need to do, and we need to do fast. And the government needs to get out of the fucking way. So let's go in a little bit more. We're going to go back to Scott Horton and Peter Van Buren on how Taiwan and China are tied together. Here we go.
You're going to say the last shots fired over Taiwan were back in 1953, and it was an artillery exchange over a couple of islands in the Straits that aren't even Taiwan proper. And since then, not a single shot has been fired. Instead, China is now Taiwan's largest trading partner. It's a trade in billions and billions of dollars, actually exceeding how much money gets passed between China and the United States. There are 11 airlines that have direct air routes across the strait back and forth. There's constant traffic. There are Chinese goods in every Taiwan store and vice versa. They are intimately tied together economically, culturally. They speak the same language. The majority of people now on Taiwan identify as Han Chinese. The indigenous people that were originally there have kind of been pushed aside. These are two organizations, two countrylets. I don't want to get into nomenclature here, that are infinitely connected to one another and whose ties to one another continue to increase on a day-by-day basis.
So this is starting to sound a whole lot more like what's going on in the Ukraine. You got the Donbass, which is an ethnically Russian area. They voted to become Russian. And essentially the CIA and the United States put the kibosh on that, even though they voted to have a referendum to leave Ukraine and join Russia. So, again, the United States sticking our big fake tits into a civil war that we have no business being a part of. Taiwan is not an American island. It's a Chinese island.
Yeah, it's
But by the tone of these things, you would think this is an island that is fighting with China. They're fighting for their freedom. They don't want anything with this big, ugly communist Chinese party. They're this terrible place. And, you know, I'm not defending China in any way. Their government is an illegitimate, corrupt government. And that's what we should be referring to them as. We should say, when they do terrible things, we say, hey, this is an illegitimate, corrupt government. And we're not going to hit you with sanctions. We're not going to start a war with you, but we are going to delegitimize you on the world stage best we can.
Yeah. And us getting news from the television and the computer screen. I honestly can't like that video or sound, the video you just played. They were saying that most people identify as Han Chinese, right?
Yeah.
You know?
These are Chinese people.
They're basically shunning the native Taiwanese people. It's the destroy the country from the inside out. They have infected the culture and the minds of
you're
the people.
You're still thinking of it as an island with a fence around it that wants nothing to do with China. This is a trading partner. This is something that's going to happen naturally. As you trade with somebody, look at the United States. Look at how many Hispanics there are in the United States, our nearest neighbor. Are we at war with China or with Mexico over them infecting our country? No, we're letting it happen more and more. And even though this isn't something that should be happening, this isn't the end of the world. You know, the culture in Southern California is highly Hispanic. The Mexican food's some of the best in the world. El Farolito in San Francisco, that's one of the best burritos you're ever going to get in your life. When they talk about diversity in this country as not being a bad thing, they're not wrong. It's controlling the amount of people that come in and how they come in that they're wrong about. I don't mind having Hispanic culture in Southern California and in San Francisco. I enjoyed it thoroughly.
Yeah. The one thing I've always been curious about, I always hear that offshoot conspiracy theory that they always focus on the southern border, but when the real numbers and the real weight and the real bad people are being smuggled in from the giant northern border while everybody's focused on the southern border.
Sure. I mean, I'm in no way defending the immigration policies of this country. I think it's horrific, but I'm trying to relate that this is not a country that doesn't want anything to do with China. They're openly trading with them. Like you said, they're flying back and forth all the time. This is not separate. They are very far more closely tied together than we are with Hawaii. It's physically closer.
Yeah.
The culture is far closer. They're going to meld better. They are far more tied together than we are with Hawaii. You know, that can't even be argued. So let's go back into Scott Horton with Daniel Davis and see if he thinks there is any chance that China will attack Taiwan.
Is there any realistic probability that China would attack Taiwan? And the answer is yes. They without question, China has been absolutely very vocal from day one, from 1949 forward, that they are willing to use force to retake Taiwan. In fact, in doing some research for a piece that I'm working on right now, it turns out that actually China had a plan to invade Taiwan in late 1949, early 1950. That was interrupted by the Korean War, and instead of sending their troops across the strait to take Taiwan, they had to divert them to, perversely, fight the United States. Yeah. When they sent 300,000 troops into the northern part of North Korea to fight us, otherwise they would have done it then. But they had been trying at various levels after that. They recovered from all the losses they suffered during that war, and in recent years, from about 1980 on, there was a good period where they were actually trying to cooperate and have a peaceful unification of something like the Hong Kong model in the period. And there was some interest on both sides of the strait, but that started changing in the 80s. And then Taiwan started becoming more independent minded. They're saying they were de facto already a country. China started saying, no, that's not going to go that way. They started getting more and more bellicose. You get into the big 1995-96 Taiwan Straits issue where missiles were flying all over the place in the sea, very close to Taiwan shores. The U.S. was sending 2 aircraft carrier battle groups through the straits, et cetera. And we almost came to blows at that time, but things cooled down. In the intermediate time, really China realized that they didn't have any answer to our aircraft carriers at that time. So they set on what has turned out to be about a 25-year period to build up their military in every capacity that will allow them to successfully attack and take Taiwan, even with all of our combat power. And that's what the gist of several pieces I've been writing here of late, that just look at the cold hard calculations that if China attacks Taiwan to retake them, and they have made it a very important plank of their national identity. I mean, it's that big to them. There's nothing we can do to stop it.
So I'm going to bring you more than one point of view. Yeah, I'm not just going to take you down one right. When you think I'm going one way, I'm going to take you another way. So, Daniel Davis is no joke. This guy knows his shit. He writes for antiwar.com. This is by no means not a joke, which is why Nancy Pelosi shouldn't be shoving her big fake tits in over there. I mean, if we want to divert a war, which there's a lot of people in the government and in the military industrial complex that would probably prefer go to war. And we shouldn't be doing shit like this. This is poking the bear.
I think maybe they should spend a little money on Nancy's face, because her tits are probably okay, but it's just that grill, baby.
I don't think there's anything to be done about that. And it's just, in a time where you're flirting with war, you've got a proxy war going with Russia, where essentially Russia considers us to be at war with them. Why are you going to fuck with the Chinese? They're already trading energy. Russia's selling natural gas and oil to China more than ever. Why would you want to fuck with these people and give them an opportunity to team up?
For a plausible World War III, probably, is the only thing that makes sense. It's just about a viable public image of a reason to go to war.
There's this.
You
remember that movie, The Ghost in the Shell, with Scarlett Johansson? She was like an android.
Oh yes,
yeah.
Yes.
So they did they did like a cartoon version of that on Netflix, and in the show, one of the main plots was centered around what they called the sustainable wars. So essentially, corporations all got together and decided, hey, we shouldn't be killing people. We'll just build all these weapons and all these robots and automated drones, and we'll just have them beat the shit out of each other out in the middle of nowhere constantly. And we'll just keep building and building and building and building.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was a pretty decent analogy for what they would like to happen.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Well, let's go back into Peter Van Buren and learn a little bit more about China.
So to say that because China is building up its armed forces, they're going to use them against Taiwan flies in the face of all history. In addition, it flies in the face of prudency. Why would you drop bombs on one of your best customers? It just doesn't make any sense. It also flies in the face of Chinese philosophy. The Chinese believe that in something called the mandate of heaven. And I know
That's
for
a
a
big
lot of
one.
listeners, they're rolling their eyes and saying, Peter's probably wearing his Mao t-shirt and pulling his gray hair into a ponytail while he's speaking. And the answer, of course, is not. But if you've worked with the Chinese diplomatically, as I have, I don't want to brag, you get to know how they think. And the way they think is they look back at their history, and the mandate of heaven says you only serve in power as long as you don't mess with the things that are important. And invasion of Taiwan would be Chinese killing other Chinese. And I'm afraid that is not something that is easily done and purposefully done. In addition, this vaunted military that the Chinese have, and I grant you that it is growing, look what it's got. They have 3 Type 75 amphibious assault ships. They carry 1,000 men each. They've got 3 of them. Estimates are that they're going to need to land. An invasion would need 1 million men landed. How many men were landed on D-Day in Normandy? 156,000. The Chinese need to build 153 more of these ships in order to reach the D-Day 1944 levels of beach landings. It's just beyond practicality. Taiwan currently fields the Harpoon by itself. Never mind the United States. We'll get to the United States. Taiwan fields the Harpoon missile. It has a range of about 60 to 80 miles officially classified. The Taiwan Strait at its widest point is 110 miles. That means Chinese ships would be under Harpoon attack almost as they leave port. Taiwan is getting ready to field a locally made 200-mile anti-ship missile, which means that it would be able to hit the Chinese ships in harbor before they even set sail. Taiwan flies the F-16V, which is unofficially nuclear capable and the most modern electronics. They have the ability to launch a formidable defense in a highly confined area against a land invasion that hasn't been done at scale since 1944. And then we introduce the United States. We're all aware of the United States' amazing military capabilities. The United States has at least 2 carrier groups at all times. The Chinese have a single aircraft carrier that they just launched. Has at least 2 groups in the Pacific at any one time. We have recently agreed with the British that they will station 2 supercarriers, and we're selling nuclear submarines to the Australians to complement our own and the British in the area. The United States can fly combat missions against China out of Guam, out of Korea, out of Japan, practically out of Hawaii with refueling. And this enormous military power can be flipped on with a switch. It's practiced all the time.
So, to me, that sounds a little bit more realistic than what Daniel Davis was saying. But like Daniel Davis said, if they were going to do this invasion, they would have to not damage these factories.
Yeah.
If that's the prize, if that's the real prize, is these semiconductors, you have to be able to do all of that without damaging your semiconductors and without letting the Taiwanese, suicide bomb it or something like that. Because, at some point, I live down by the nuclear testing facility here in Idaho for the Department of Energy. They test all of the reactors there. If we started having red Chinese rolling through the streets of Idaho, I wouldn't have a problem going over there and blowing everything up before they got access to it.
Yeah.
Sure, it's going to set us back, but fuck them.
All I keep hearing is another reason to send $40 billion to a small country.
Yeah. Country like, with big explanation points. CUNT3. Yeah, exactly. The U.S. military is just a fucking killing machine. I'm not a military guy. I know a lot about airplanes. I'd take an F-16 over a new generation Chinese fighter plane. We don't know how those fucking things work. We sure as shit know how an F-16 works, and they work just fine. the Chinese only are going to let loose what they want to let loose on those things. And even our 5th generation fighters aren't what they were billed to be. The F-22 program was a fucking financial disaster. It was a 50-year project, and the plane's not that much better than an F-15.
Yeah, but you got to keep trying.
You got to keep going.
Got to advance.
So he was also bringing up the mandate of heaven. And this came up in COVID. I don't know if you remember hearing about this in COVID, but this was brought into play a couple of times. And I remember hearing something about their zero COVID policy was essentially that in order for Emperor Xi to fulfill the mandate of heaven, he had to fulfill this zero COVID policy, which is why you got all of these hardcore lockdowns in Shanghai and just draconian measures, because he has to project that he's not fucking with the mandate of heaven. He's not messing with the big things. He's not killing Chinese. And again, why they probably had to hide the evidence of the lab leak. So I pulled this from a Washington Post article. They get some things right every once in a while. Since ascending to the top job, China's political and military hierarchy in 2012, Xi has moved to make himself the strongest leader since Mao Zedong, the founder of the communist state. He unleashed an anti-corruption campaign to purge rivals and preside over an Orwellian expansion of the surveillance state. 2 years ago, he scrapped term limits, effectively enabling him to stay in power indefinitely. And this year, he has been styling himself as the people's leader, a term applied to Mao. But with China's death toll from the coronavirus nearing 3,000, this was early, Xi faces an unprecedented challenge to his leadership. When things get out of kilter, heaven expresses disfavor, said Schnell, citing the Chinese philosopher. Xi has stripped of his invincibility and is calling into question the mandate of heaven. So this is no joke. We don't really understand their philosophy and their history. I mean, I don't know how much you know about Chinese philosophy, but I don't know a fucking thing. So this could be no joke.
He's stripped of his invincibility.
Yeah, man. This is no joke. You should read Michael Malice's book about North Korea. It's fucking wild, the shit that he did up there. Just incredible. Like, you read his book, and it's kind of like a comedy, but it's, the most horrible things ever. It's wild. All right, so let's
like
hear
Mortal Kombat.
Dude, it's the things that he basically subscribed himself as a god, and everybody in that entire country thought he was a god, and just all these weird things. It's wild. All right, so let's go back to Peter Van Buren and see what he thinks if China will invade Taiwan.
Joe Biden, about a week or so ago, blurted out that the United States will absolutely defend Taiwan. And his handlers quickly mentioned that this was another of his goofy gaffes, and that they said, quote, there's no change in policy. Biden's gaffe was the most honest statement he's ever made as a politician. And the White House is walking it back by saying there's no change in policy was actually one of the more clever things they've said, because the policy is and always has been that the United States is going to defend Taiwan. We sell them modern weapons. We have our entire Pacific forces postured towards the defense of Taiwan. We do constant freedom of navigation movements. We have a constant aerial presence. We constantly spy on China. All of this stuff only points one direction, that the United States would in fact step in. Now, other than that, why would the United States be bound to step in? And the answer is that the entire Asian alliance that the United States, for better or worse, created after World War II depends on the belief in Japan and Korea and other places, but those countries in particular, that the United States will step up to their defense. And if the United States were not to defend Taiwan, then Korea and Japan would go nuclear the same week. because they would no longer be able to rely on the United States as the guarantor of peace in Asia to a certain extent. The other thing, of course, would be that the world economy would be sent into a tailspin by the invasion of Taiwan. The dollar would crash. You think you're having shipping
Dollar
supply problems
crashing.
right now? Imagine
How could that happen?
war there. Last but not least, China would never take the risk of invading Taiwan because the United States has 10 nuclear weapons to every one China has, and we could probably successfully deliver 9 out of those 10 into China's territory, unlike the Chinese who kind of hope they'd lob one across the Pacific somewhere. Nobody does a risk versus gain calculation with nuclear weapons in the mix and comes out saying, you know what we got to do? We've got to invade this island for no real purpose other than some propaganda statements our leaders have made talking about eventual unification. So if I say that the United States will intervene, that's the reasons why.
So there you go. They will defend Taiwan. The thing that's with nuclear weapons is you only have to hit one, and it doesn't have to hit land. I mean, you don't even necessarily want to hit land. You want to hit it, miles above San Francisco and knock all the power out, or you want to lob it into the ocean and cause a tidal wave. You don't have to have a precision bomb. You can destroy San Francisco with one nuke in the water, 50 miles offshore.
Yeah. The one thing I heard, it was Japan and somebody else that they said,
Korea.
I can't remember if it was if China invades Taiwan, but the response was Japan and some other country would immediately go nuclear.
Yes.
The only thing I could think was, hasn't Japan already been nuclear?
No, Japan doesn't have an offensive army. They have a defense force. They rely on us 100% for their military.
I'm talking about Hiroshima.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well. They got nuked. They don't have nukes. They went nuclear a while back. That is absolutely true. All right. So, do you know who Colonel McGregor is? You heard of Colonel McGregor before?
Not off the top of my head.
He worked for the Trump administration for a little while. He's the man. We're gonna read a little bit about him, and then we're gonna go to a couple videos from the colonel. So this is on Wikipedia. Military career. McGregor was the squadron operations officer who essentially directed the Battle of 73 Easting during the Gulf War. Facing an Iraqi Republican Guard opponent, he led a contingent consisting of 19 tanks, 26 Bradley fighting vehicles, and 4 M1R mortar carriers through the sandstorm to the 73 Eastern at roughly 18 hours on 26 February. He destroyed almost 70 Iraqi armored vehicles with no U.S. casualties in a 23-minute span of battle. He was at the front of the formation in the center with Eagle Troop on the right and Ghost Troop on the left. McGregor designated Eagle Troop the main attack and positioned himself to the left of Eagle Troop. Eagle Troop scouts subsequently followed McGregor's tank through a minefield during which he destroyed 2 enemy tanks. As McGregor was towards the front of the battle involved shooting, he didn't request artillery support or report events to superiors until the battle was virtually over. According to one of his superior officers, the risks he undertook could have been criticized had they turned out ugly. So this guy essentially turned his radio off and directed a tank battle through a sandstorm and a minefield from the front. So, no joke. And he went on and he wrote a couple of books about how to reform the military. And he did it while he was still in the military, and it really fucked him. The higher-ups didn't like it. A couple of generals liked what he wanted to do, but the higher-ups put the kibosh on it, and it cost him from being a general. So, let's go to a clip with Doug McGregor on Judging Freedom with the great Judge Napolitano.
What would he say? And I know you're not a shrink. You're a military guy. we will defend Taiwan forcefully?
Incomprehensible to me. I can't explain it, because any reasonable person would simply look at the map and say, this is 7,000 miles away from the United States. Moving forces that far that'll make any difference to the outcome is extremely difficult, very hazardous today. The Chinese now have lots of submarines, but more important, they have enormous intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance capabilities overhead in space. They can track everything we do. They can turn most of our surface fleet into a target in short order. So the bottom line is, why would we travel halfway around the world to make war on China on China's doorstep? It's a strategically stupid idea. Now, if the Chinese want to make war on us and they'd like to sail over off the coast of California, that would be very advantageous to us. They'd be very stupid. Right. So the point is, the whole idea of war with China is just a dumb idea. It ought to be shelved, and there's no reason for it. We can work out our differences without that. But this notion of now presenting suddenly overnight Taiwan as this glistening city on the hill of democracy and liberalism.
Oh, what's that sound
like? It's just misleading.
Mm-hmm.
All the states in Northeast Asia are quite similar. Japan, Korea, Taiwan, China, very similar values and attitudes. And we don't understand those things. They're different from us. This whole thing is unnecessary. So why did he say what he did? Someone planted the idea in him, or he wouldn't have said it. So you'll have to ask who's running the show in the White House.
Woohoo! That's who Trump should have made Secretary of Defense. If he'd made McGregor Secretary of Defense, he'd have ended all the wars. He'd have actually done some good. So when he says war with China and defending Taiwan is stupid based on his career, I think we ought to believe him.
For sure. That was my opinion of the Ukraine situation.
It's exactly, I almost forgot about that. It's the exact same playbook they're pulling with Ukraine. They were writing articles in Vice a couple years ago about how Ukraine was the most corrupt country in Europe, but now it's this shining democracy on the hill, exactly like he said with Taiwan.
Yeah.
They want to... and I mean...
I feel like...
In an hour, we went through and got more history than you could get out of the corporate press in all of the clips they've put out about Taiwan and China in the last month.
Yeah. I subscribe to the whole, the United States needs to stop trying to be the world police.
Yeah.
We need to look within our own borders, take care of what people we have within those borders, and before we start even trying to pretend like we can take care of anybody outside. So, you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah. Well, let's see if Colonel McGregor thinks we're able to do that.
I think privately, the Army Chief of Staff and certainly Milley have both admitted that the U.S. Army is in no condition to fight a war. They can't recruit. They're suffering from an acute
condition to fight a war. Isn't it their constitutional mission to be ready to fight a war?
Well, you could make the same comment about all the armed forces, but the truth is that the armed forces largely, especially Army, Marines, but I think the Army is probably one of the worst examples. Navy's probably almost as bad, really exist to provide jobs for generals.
Oh.
So you have this enormous bureaucracy that is built up over time. Today, we have in the United States Armed Forces 40 four-star generals and admirals. 40. Now, to those who don't understand what this means, during World War II, when we had 12.2 million men under arms fighting all over the world, at the height of that war, until the war was nearly over, we only had 7 four-stars. Today, we have 1.1 million under arms, and we have 40. Now, anyone who knows anything about military history knows that this kind of overhead is corrupting. It's unnecessary. It constipates and slows down decision-making. It makes for bad policy. So I think in this sense, we're Banana Republic-like, in that we have lots of people running around as generals, wearing lots and lots of medals, none of which have anything to do with fighting on anybody under fire or killing anybody or being valorous, but a lot to do with, I was in the theater when this happened, and I was here when this happened, and my fellow generals rewarded me with more decorations. It's embarrassing. This is a terrible mess that needs to be addressed. So I think that you're right. That is the constitutional obligation, but no, we're not ready to do anything. Our combat units are a fraction of the size of the force that we call the U.S. Army. When you go into the Marines, you have 63,000, 65,000 Marines in aviation and aviation support alone. When you go down and look at the numbers of Marine infantry regiments and you count the numbers of Marines that you've got in those, that's only 30, perhaps 30,000. So where is everyone? Well, you have a multitude of headquarters all over the world, all these regional unified commands, these functional commands. Then you have single service commands. We have a lot of 4-stars in the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force. All of this is nonsense. It's not needed. It should have gone away in the 90s with the end of the Cold War. Instead, it got bigger.
Yeah. And he got into why later on in the interview. We all know it's about weapons manufacturing. More generals means more access points for manufacturers to make deals, more meetings, and you get a bigger, revolving door process where generals can go into bureaucracy after they get out, or they can go into a chairman of the board of a weapons contractor and meet with another general that he served with. It's just a big fucking racket, like he says. And hey, how great does that make you feel? We don't have the power to fight a war. And why is you, as a Midwestern family or a family in Idaho or a family in Montana, why would you want to send your kids to fight for a military that's probably going to be training them to fight you, not over in China?
Yeah. Very good point. It was saying that there was a bunch of generals, right?
Yeah.
Not a lot of infantry.
Well, they have to have the infantry they do have is set up as staffers in all of these foreign bases. How many you lived on Pendleton? How many people worked on that base just to keep it operational? Thousands.
I never lived.
You knew somebody who lived on Camp Pendleton.
I visited frequently.
Absolutely did not ever surf there.
No, I surfed there, but I never spent more than 3 nights in a row.
Well, guess what? The good news is we have the first 4-star black general in the United States Marine Corps. U.S. Marine Lieutenant General Michael Landry, in charge of all Marine Corps operations in Africa. We got to promote him. We need one over there. Let's throw one over there. I mean, how fucking racist is that? It's like Kamala Harris getting her fucking presidential or vice presidential nomination because she was the only black woman qualified. That was, had a big enough pop to make a difference. I mean, it's just crazy, some of the shit they pull.
Dude, I'm kind of, I saw that video about the AOC Big Booty Latina.
Oh, that's hilarious.
And I don't know. I think it's made me a fan.
Oh, she's smoking hot. Did you ever see that video of her dancing on the rooftop? Oh, I'll send you that one afterwards. Alex Stein, the same guy that did that video, he has a great one where he got next to what's his fucking name? The guy with the eye patch. Dan Crenshaw. He cornered Dan Crenshaw in the airport and he started calling him Eye Patch McCain. It's like, Eye Patch McCain, you sold out our country, you warmonger. You work for the World Economic Forum. He's just screaming at him. It's great. Nolan.
I couldn't believe he got AOC to bite. So hard.
She didn't know who he was, and then as soon as they found out afterwards, she went and had her handlers go try and it's just fucking great. I love it. I thought it was great. Nolan, where can the people find you?
You can find me at this point in time on the Instagrams at 5150 Nolan. If you want some dank motorcycle and cat content, you know what to do.
Right on. If you're listening to this right now, we've got a YouTube channel, Too Hard for the Radio podcast. You can go watch the YouTube video. Maybe if you're listening for this long, you either think we're assholes or, you know, you liked what you heard. So hit the buttons on, maybe give us a comment, you know, all those things. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. The more numbers we get, the more, you know, we'll get propped up. The more people see the show. Great for us. Hey, and since you're listening to new podcasts, you can find a new podcast app, Podcasting 2.0. You can go to Podfriend or CurioCaster, and if you felt like screaming at us at one point in this podcast, you can do that. You can go onto those apps and you can pinpoint the moment that you want to scream at us and shoot us a couple Satoshi Bitcoins, and you can scream at us and we'll read it live on the next podcast. What do you think about that, Nolan?
Yeah. That sounds sick.
And you know what else we've got? We've got a newsletter. So go to
newsletter?
Yeah, we got a newsletter. Go to toohardfortheradio.substack.com. Toohardfortheradio.substack.com. I just choked on my teeth there for a second. That was beautiful. And you can sign up for our newsletter every week before the show. The morning of, you're going to get an email. It'll have some cool stuff in it. Maybe an article about stuff that we didn't talk about on the podcast, or maybe an article from the future. You never really know. But it'll give you links to where you can find the podcast on YouTube or Rumble or any Podcasting 2.0 apps. And that will be our home base until I can afford a better website, because the website that I have, not so great.
But it's on the web.
It is there, and you can link to it at my Instagram at Hard Radio Pod, and that's also where I'm at on Twitter. I'm still dark on Twitter because I'm embarrassed about our sound, to be honest. I can't believe that our sound is still this terrible, but we're going to figure it out. We have computer issues, and Nolan doesn't understand technology. It's like sending an iPad to a caveman. He looks at it and goes, "Oh, shiny rock," and he hangs it up in his room and spins it around at night and goes, "Oh, look at the pretty colors."
Worship shiny video box.
All right, so we got one more story for the night. The Don got raided. Did you hear about this? He got his Mar-a-Lago.
Oh yeah,
got raided.
Oh yeah.
And this has got to be some serious corruption. I didn't do too much digging into it. I heard people complaining about it. And, you know, I would not be surprised if this is totally corrupt. They want to do anything they can to keep him from running this year. I heard that the judge that signed the warrant was a magistrate judge and not a federal judge, and it should be a federal judge and something like this. And apparently this magistrate judge was on the Epstein case as a lawyer, and he was on the offensive, and then he switched to the defensive, and they accused him of like holding information and switching over to help Epstein out. So, you know, wouldn't be surprised at all if this guy's blackmailed in any way. But
the plot thickens.
The one thing,
the one thought.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say the one thought I had is obviously all these people, you know, like the Obamas, the Clintons, the Bushes, they clearly live in a society and like a large circle of people where the trust is based off of, I have shit on you, you have shit on me, so we can trust each other.
Yep.
Trump seems to not live in that realm.
Yes.
He, you know, don't get me wrong. Everybody's done something wrong. Everybody's done something illegal. There's degrees to things. But whatever the bottom line is that it is a play to find is the last grasping at straws to get him on anything that they can.
Yeah.
Find any kind of concrete evidence.
Any way to keep him from running again.
Yeah.
I wasn't gonna play this, but on the Clintons, I've got a great video for that. Here is all right, so this video I'm gonna have to describe it a little bit to begin with, but it cuts back and forth from Joe Rogan at UFC. So let me come on. Here we go.
You mean like what's
one of the things you've been talking about on your show is your allegation that government officials are aiding in pedophilia, child trafficking, and the grooming of children, right?
Well, you mean like what Jeffrey Epstein did with the Clintons?
That was at Alex Jones's trial. The one thing I keep hearing, I'm sure we've pissed right-wingers off enough on this show, which is good because we pissed off all the left-wingers in the last show, so we had to go at the right-wingers on this one. But the one thing that pisses me off is you keep hearing this, oh, they've never done this to a president before, and the precedent that they're setting, and oh, they could keep doing this. And to me, it's like, I'm sure this is probably a bullshit raid, but I think the precedent should be set. I wouldn't mind if they raided presidents randomly. You think that Bill Clinton doesn't have something lying around in his basement, or, the Bushes don't have a dead body or two buried in their cellar? I mean, to me, hey, pop these people randomly. If you're one of these high-ranking officials, get your fucking house searched once a year randomly. Make sure or not even once a year, every 10 years. So you think you can feel, or maybe not even in a year. You just have to submit to being randomly searched at any time. Keep these fucking people on their toes.
Anybody at any time.
Hell no, you'd have to go.
Citizen.
You'd have to go through like a higher court and able to get it. But if you had a decent, which our government can never do, so it would be abused fucking horribly. So it's probably a bad idea.
Process. Go through the court process to raid Nancy Reagan.
Oh yeah, who knows what she's got? I'd love to see some naked pictures of old Nance. And let's see those big fake Nancy Pelosi tits.
Mm-hmm.
But hey, if you're a Trump guy, don't worry. Like Q said, there's a plan and there's a storm coming.
Think about what's happening right now. And Trump, the Patriots, they brought them down this path where they exactly wanted them to go. And this is going to get worse and worse for them. The Patriots are in complete and utter control. And the storm, it's coming. And it's going to hit really hard.
That's it for tonight, ladies and gentlemen. The storm is coming.
Hard, motherfucking radio.